Well, let's speak to Andreas Krieg now, who's an assistant professor of defense studies at the King's College in London. He joins us live from our news center there in London. Andreas, very good to have you on the NewsGrid again. So despite the Russians agreeing to this latest ceasefire in Syria and even saying that they would allow a 5-hour humanitarian pause in eastern Ghouta every day, there is still no ceasefire. Why do you think this is? And how much leverage does Russia actually have on the Assad government, and are they using that leverage right now?
Well, two questions here. I mean, do they have leverage, and are they using the leverage? First of all, the leverage now has diminished a lot over the last 3 years, or 2.5 years since Russia got involved. Initially, Russia got involved when Assad was at the brink of losing the civil war. They turned the tide of this war, put Assad very much back in the driver's seat. Assad is very much able to consolidate his power now within the regions that he controls. He's unable to restore power as it was in 2011, but he's very much in the driver's seat. He is a lot more confident now than he has been 2.5 years ago. And so with that confidence, particularly because he's working also with the Iranians, with that confidence, he is not really, he doesn't really like to be pushed around by the Russians. So right. I think the leverage has diminished also because I think the relationship is more egalitarian. At the same time, the second part of the question is, does Russia use it? Yeah. I don't think Russia is using that leverage because I think all of what is Russia saying at the moment is part of their information warfare, is showing the West that we're trying to do something but we can't, and they're blaming it on the rebels, saying the rebels are terrorists, the rebels are using humanitarian shields, so we actually were trying to help but we can't because we're being attacked by the rebels. So I mean, I think it's on the one hand there.
I want to pick up on one of your points there, because you've made a couple of interesting points. You say that the relationship is more egalitarian now, but do you think that Assad has stopped responding to Russian pressure? Who's controlling whom basically right now at this stage?
I mean, the whole Syrian war is a proxy war between different patrons and proxies between different principals and agents. And I think it's very difficult to say that some powers are now principals and the other powers are agents, and to say that he's a puppet of either Iran or Russia. I think either Iran and Russia need Assad, and Assad needs both of them. So it's a lot more egalitarian, and Assad can diversify his sponsorship, if you will. I mean, he's getting weapons, financial support, and most importantly, support for his ground war from Iran, which is existential. And Russia provides him with another vital ingredient, which is air power. Right. So he needs both, but he can play one of the proxies, one of the patrons against each other, saying, if you don't support me, I can always go back to Iran.
So what are the Russians then after in Syria right now? What is it that the Russians want out of their intervention? What is motivating them to continue supporting Bashar al-Assad?
Right. I think unlike the Iranians, who have an ideological support with the family of Bashar al-Assad, and because he is an Alawite, I think the Russians are more pragmatist. They want to have a regime that is friendly in Damascus towards Moscow. That doesn't need to be necessarily Assad, but they need to have a regime which is similar to Assad that is pro-Russian. So the worst thing that can happen for the Russians is if America expands its small footholds, if the Turks are expanding their foothold, or Iran is expanding the foothold at the expense of Russia. So Russia sees this, as you said prior in this report, sees Syria as a geostrategic hub in the region. They need it for energy, they need it for military operations, and it's also part of the global power game. So they can't lose the regime. But if it comes to a new kind of arrangement with alternative forces in Damascus, even with some of the opposition forces, Russia would back it as long as this new regime would help the Russians maintain their status in Syria. So in that way, Assad is expendable, and they can potentially get rid of him, which is something the Iranians obviously don't want to do. But they can't do without Assad, because if he's gone, that God knows what's coming afterwards. So it's a very difficult game for Russia to play. They need to stay in there, but at the same time, they're not the most powerful player on the ground.
As always, very interesting to hear your thoughts on this story. Andreas Krieg joining us there from London. And I want to point you now to this very